So the much awaited video on Indian mythology recommendations is finally here and I'm so eager to do this. So I've been waiting all the while. I wanted to post this on Navratri and somehow it went on. I wanted to post it for Diwali and I'm here finally at last. Hi everyone, I'm Archana Balasubramaniam and welcome to my YouTube channel. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about some of these Indian mythology book recommendations. But before we start off with the book recommendations, I'd like to give you a few key pointers on how to find if if the book is actually good, somewhere close to history, close to the actual text, and these are some pointers I'd like to give you before that. Okay, so with that, let's start off. So nowadays we notice that a lot of people, like a lot of authors have been coming up with Indian mythology retellings. So if you notice, like perspectives that were not previously discussed about or previously not thought of have also been coming out. So maybe from Ravana's perspective or Kamsa's perspective or Karna's perspective. So all these lesser known characters or maybe the villain's point of view or the women's point of view in those in the literature, they've all been coming out, they've all been taking prominence too. So in one way it is actually a pretty good step, I feel, because you get to know what that other person would have felt. But in another way, I've noticed that because of all these retellings, right, we are moving away from the actual text. So recently I read a book on Ravana's wife Mandodari. So before I go ahead with the video, I understand that some of you spell it as Ravan, spell his name as Ravan, and some of us spell it as Ravana. Some of you spell it as Ram and some of them spell it as Rama. Everything is the same. It is just that because of these cultural differences we spell it differently, but both are correct and both are widely accepted. So okay, let me talk about the book that I read recently. So I read this book called Mandodari. This was by Manini J. Anandini. So when I read this book, at the very start of the book, I came across a story from the Uttar Ramayana. So Uttar Ramayana is actually, they say that it's a spin-off of Ramayana, okay? But the thing is, Ramayana has been written with different chapters. It's called Balakanda, Ayodhyakanda, Aranyakanda, Sundarakanda, etc. Okay? So there is this one such chapter also called as Uttarakanda or Uttarkand. Okay? And while all these chapters do not have a spin-off of their own, do not have a novel or an entire book of their own, it is said that only Uttarkand has a book of its own called as Uttar Ramayana. Okay? But then the problem here arises when Uttar Ramayana differs completely from the actual text of Ramayana. So if you're actually talking about a novel and the protagonist of the story, when you describe the characters of that particular protagonist, you would have certain attributes towards them. I mean certain attributes to them, right? But then the Uttar Ramayana completely digresses from the original qualities of the main characters of the book. So the people who are treated as heroes in the actual Ramayana are now given a very tainting image that actually digresses from the whole Ramayana itself. Okay, so it is not reliable because a lot of people say Valmiki actually didn't write the Uttar Ramayana, and I feel it is true too. Valmiki has not written the Uttar Ramayana, and which is why some of these texts, right, some of these stories, mythology retellings that have been adapted from Uttar Ramayana they actually have a very untrue narrative to them. So I put down that book because as soon as I got to know that it was actually adapted from the Uttar Ramayana, it didn't make sense to read it any further. So while you're reading these books, right, read it with caution because authors a lot of times they use their creativity and anything that happens, right, it is either glorified or it is vilified depending on the author's perspective. So read it with discretion. Don't take all of these at face value because other than the actual text, right, none of these can actually stick to the actual text. So a lot of things may actually digress from the truth. So keep that in mind and read it with caution. Even the books that I am recommending, it does not mean that these books are exactly adapted from the text. In fact, these books also digress in a lot of ways away from the text. So please read that with caution, take it with a grain of salt and don't believe everything you read. So with that, let's start off with my very first recommendation and my most favorite book, most favorite mythology book of this year. The very first recommendation that I have for you is called Karna's Wife, the Outcast Queen. Okay, this was written by Kavita Kane or Kavita Kane. I don't know how exactly you spell the last name. So this was written by Kavita, and this talks about a lesser known character, that is Karna's wife. So Karna's wife is called Urvi. Okay, Karna had two wives. One of them was Vrishali and the other one was Urvi. So this talks about everything from Urvi's perspective. So as you all know, Karna was treated as a charioteer's son, though he was actually a prince. Okay, he never knew about it all his life. He never knew about his birth all his life. So he was treated as someone who did not belong to the royal clan or the Kshatriya clan. So Karna's wife Urvi, who married him despite knowing of his stature, actually had to face a lot of hardships because Urvi was a princess. Karna's first wife Vrishali was someone of his own stature, but then Urvi was a princess of Pokea, and she, despite against all the protests, she went against all these odds and married Karna. So this is what the story is about, and it talks a lot about Karna's perspective, Urvi's perspective, the whole of Mahabharata, because we know the story because at least I know the story from the Pandavas' perspective. I know how it felt to be a Pandava, what are the hardships they faced, but looking at it from different lens, right? Like how was Karna, how did Urvi actually see Karna? So these are all the perspectives that are discussed, and the Mahabharata has been shown in a very different light. So this is one book that I highly recommend. I rated about 4.5 out of 5, or maybe let's say a 4.75 out of 5 because it was that good. Okay, so please do pick this book up. The second book recommendation that I have for you is a very widely known book. It is called Palace of Illusions. This was written by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. So Palace of Illusions is something I talked about last year as well, but back then I think I had only about 300 subscribers or so, and now that the number of people in my channel have increased, I felt the need to talk about it again. So Palace of Illusions talks about Draupadi's perspective of the Mahabharata. So Draupadi is the wife of the 5 Pandavas, and all the hardships that she had to go through because she was born as a princess but had to live in the forest and then come back as a queen. So these are all the different stages in her life, right? So all the hardships she had to go through because of what the Pandavas were put through, because of what the Kauravas put them through, and not just that, even the relationships between her and her husbands. So these are all talked about, and I felt that it was a very lesser known perspective, but it was actually amazing to read it from Draupadi's point of view and how she would have probably felt about the whole thing. So like I already gave the disclaimer, like not every mythology that we read is like 100% true. I did disagree with it on certain aspects, but of course, like overall I felt it was a great read, and I rate it again a 4.5 out of 5. So please do check this out as well. The third book I'd like to talk about is called Sita's Sister, and this was written by Kavita again. So this is from Urmila's perspective of the Ramayana. Okay, and all the things that Urmila went through. So when you read Sita's Sister, right, it's not like you're reading Ramayana again, but you see all the things like the princesses faced before they got married and what they faced after they got married. So if you all know, Urmila is Lakshmana's wife and Lakshmana is Rama's brother. So Sita, Urmila, Mandavi and Shrutakirti, these 4 princesses, they got married to the 4 brothers, or who are the sons of King Dashratha, that is Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata and Shatrughna. Okay, and once they got married, Rama was exiled into the forest and Sita had to go with him to the forest. So once she went into the forest, right, there are a lot of hardships that Sita had to face. But Urmila was left behind because Lakshmana had to accompany Rama to the forest for 14 years. So all the things that Urmila faced and all the hardships that she went through, and how she comes out as a formidable woman, someone I really love now. Like, I think she's a beloved character of the Ramayana now, and that is how amazing Urmila actually is. So this book talks all about Urmila's perspective on the Mahabharata, and I think it is 100% a must read. So I rate this book about 4 out of 5 stars, and you should definitely check this out as well. So the last book recommendation I have for you is called Forest of Enchantments. This is again by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. So Forest of Enchantments talks about Sita's perspective on the Ramayana. Okay, so how Sita as a princess of Mithila got married to Rama, someone she dearly loved, someone she fell in love with, and all the hardships that they had to face. And going into the forest, she had to encounter like other people, other demons. She had to she was kidnapped by Ravana, and during that time, like before like she was kidnapped, of course, like she also met Ahalya, who was Sage Gautama's wife. So all the things that she goes through when she encounters different people, different types of people, right? So these are all detailed really well in the Forest of Enchantments. So I absolutely loved Sita's perspective on the Ramayana, and contrary to what people see her as, right? So some of these people think that Sita was just a woman who just went with her husband Rama to the forest, and she was probably very submissive. Absolutely not. None of these women in our history were ever people who didn't who were not strong, or who didn't have the strength to go through those hardships. They were absolutely strong and formidable, and they are highly respected in our culture. So reading this again was a reminder of the strength of people's character in our literature, and I highly recommend this book as well. So the Forest of Enchantments, again I rate this a 4.5 out of 5, and definitely it is a must read. So these are all my recommendations for now. I went through a lot of mythology books to recommend you these 4 books because I didn't really resonate with a lot of books actually, which is why I'm not recommending them. But these 4 books are something you should definitely check out. So with this, we're done with the recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed my video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I'm so close to hitting 1K now. Thank you all for your love and support. Stay happy, stay blessed, and stay kind. Bye.